Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie, and today I'm going to go through my top books of April as my April wrap-up. So for quick stats, I read 26 books in April. I ended up DNFing 5 books in total. And then for genres read, I read 14 fantasy books, 6 romance, 3 sci-fi, 2 fiction books, and 1 historical fiction. So I think I have 7 books on here that really stuck out to me that I'm still thinking about after I've read them. So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Winner's Kiss by Marie Rutkowski. This is the finale in the Winner's Curse trilogy, which is an older YA trilogy that I started a couple months ago, and I really enjoyed this. We're following 2 main characters, Kestrel and Aaron. In our first book, Kestrel is the general's daughter who has to decide if she wants to join the military or get married by her 17th birthday. And she is out in the market with one of her friends, pondering this choice, when she sees a young man being sold as a slave, and she gets this feeling that she just wants to buy him. So she purchases him, and throughout that, he ends up becoming her attendant, and they start to develop a very strained friendship, and we get to learn a lot more as to why Aaron's people are becoming slaves when they're in his country. We learn a lot more about Kestrel's heritage, especially from her father, the general, and you see the 2 characters start to just fall for each other, but they're fighting every second of it. I love this. There's actually no magic in this, even though it's considered a fantasy. It is very just almost medieval-esque. And I really liked that there was no magic. I liked that there was a lot of mainly just power and political dynamics within the story. And all of it was done really, really well. And I think my favorite part is I love a good internal struggle. And this has some of the best internal struggles I've ever seen in characters, both for Kestrel and Aaron. I loved this series. It's definitely one of my favorites. I will be continuing. I believe there's a companion series. It starts with The Midnight Lie, which I think is a 20-some years after the events of this story, so I'm excited to jump into that one. Up next, I have November 9 by Colleen Hoover. I've been trying to read more and more Colleen Hoover books, and this one I saw circulating a lot on TikTok recently, so I decided to pick this one up. This follows a young couple who they meet each other when they are just out of high school or college, and they both want more from their lives, so they decide that they don't want to date or anything because they feel like everything is happening way too fast, but they will meet on November 9th every year. No contact in between and throughout the year, and they do. So this book, we only get to see the November 9th. And I really loved how this story progressed. Even though we're only seeing one day at a time, the chapters are like the first November 9, the second November 9, and the story progresses that way. And I loved it. It never felt rushed. You still get how they're doing and different things that happened in between them. And it was such a good book. I sobbed at the end of this book. It was so shocking, and it took it was such just a wild card story, and this just even more solidifies how much I love Colleen Hoover's books and how much they just in such a short amount of time can just grip you and just take you along for the ride. Up next, I have What Lies Beyond the Veil by Harper L. Woods. This is a fantasy book that I saw going around TikTok a couple months ago, and I finally got it on my Kindle, and I flew through this book. It had every trope that I absolutely adore in a fantasy book. We are following this young woman who lives right on the border between the Vale and the human lands, and the Vale was put up to prevent the Fae from taking advantage of the humans. But when the Vale falls, and they're now these marked, which essentially means that they have a mate over in the land. They have a Fae mate. So she ends up getting this mark and goes on the run and meets this young boy who also is Fae marked, and they just decide that it is in both their best interests to run away together for survival. And they start to fall for each other, and many other YA tropes exist. Not YA tropes. Many other fantasy tropes. This is not a YA book. Please don't think this is a YA book. It's not. It's an adult. But you would think that if with a book that had so many different tropes in it, it would get a little corny. And at times it did, but it was really well executed. I loved the different tropes. It fit the characters and it fit within the story. Nothing felt forced. Our main character was the very cookie cutter YA protagonist. She was a girl. She wasn't like other girls. She had an abusive past. But I really liked her relationship with the love interest. I thought that the relationship was really well developed. And it was it was a slow burn. But once like the slow burn hit its peak, and it was really well done. I just loved this book. It was really fun, and I will definitely be reading the sequel. Next, I have Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. This book shocked me. I read the synopsis and I was a little hesitant going into it. This is following a young girl who finds out that she is a monster. Essentially, she can steal time from humans and then go back in time or forwards, depending on it, with the time that she is stolen from the humans. And when her entire family, her and her enemies' families, are outright murdered by the guy that she really liked, she has to essentially take up the mantle of being a monster and taking time from humans, try and prevent the tragedy of her family's murder. And she's traveling with her family's like arch nemesis's son. Like their families were very warring, and he has to kind of teach her about this time travel because she's been left in the dark for so long. And I thought that this was such a strong story. I loved the time travel aspect. I'm not usually into time travel, but this was done really, really well. And I just loved how she played up on all of the time travel-esque tropes that you see in media, and her newfound buddy's just like, that's not how any of this works. And it did have a lot of the dark academia vibes to it. And it was really well executed. I loved the plot twist within this story, and I'm really needing book 2, because while this did end on a satisfying ending, it wasn't quite there yet, but I expect more as we go along. Up next is another one of the Kindle books that I read, and that is Grip by Kennedy Ryan. I've seen this book all over BookTube for so long, and I've never read it because I never had a Kindle until recently. But I recently got Kindle Unlimited and finally bit the bullet and I've read Flow and I read Grip. And I am really kicking myself for not reading these sooner. Oh my goodness, this is one of the best slow burn romances I've ever read. I love this story. We are following Grip, who is an aspiring rapper in Los Angeles, as he very quickly falls for his best friend's twin sister, Bristol. We also get Bristol's perspective, and she is trying to build a relationship with her brother when she meets his best friend and starts to fall for him really, really fast. So that's in Flow. We get that set up. Flow is like a 120-some page novella. Once we get into the actual book, Grip, it's about 8 years later, and they are still just not with each other, and they're just fighting the feelings, and you see it. It's so well done. I loved it. The stakes were really high. You're dealing with a lot of very like powerful, money-hungry people. This deals with like a lot of aspects around systemic racism. This deals with Black Lives Matter, police brutality, a lot of really heavy topics. But it was done so well. I fell in love with this. I'm actually reading Still, which is the 3rd book in the series right now, and I'm obsessed. Up next, I have Wings of Shadow by Nicki Preto. This is the 3rd and final book in the Crown of Feathers trilogy. I reread the entire series this month. I hadn't read the finale, and I'm obsessed. I loved how everything tied together. Crown of Feathers, we're following this ancient race of Phoenix Riders as they are trying to take back their kingdom. And we follow 2 sisters, Veronica and Val, as they try and make their way through these Phoenix Riders. Veronica is the YA protagonist who just exudes kindness, and Val is the opposite. Her sister is the cruel and will do anything to get her way kind of person. and you see them butt heads a lot in this huge sibling rivalry. And I loved it, and everything came together in this finale. I loved it. I was a hot mess at the end of this book. It was so well wrapped up. All of our loose ends were tied so nicely, and I want Nicki Preto to write I just need a better epilogue. Not better. The epilogue was great. I want more. I want like a 20 years later from this world, because the phoenixes were cool, the magic was cool. I love the animage aspect because it wasn't just relationships with phoenixes, it was relationships with all animals. And I really wanted to explore that more. So I really hope that she's writing more within this world, because I will gobble it up. These are fantastic books. Highly recommend this trilogy. And last but not least, my favorite book that I read in April is Raybearer by Ifueko. I've had this on my TBR. It's been staring at me for months, and I finally picked it up. And oh my gosh, I am so glad that I did. This was such a lush and vibrant story. We're following Terasai, who has basically been sheltered her entire life. And her mother just makes her call her the lady. And she is brought up with very naive, and then is sent to become a part of the council. And it's essentially this council of children for the next king. And she tasks her daughter with killing the crown prince as a form of revenge. And I really love this. This was a lot of internal struggle of wanting to please your parents, but also wanting to live your own life. The magic system is really interesting. The way the council works is these 12 kids who are chosen by the crown prince because they have a connection with him and each other. They can like mind share, and they all share each other's magic, and they get sick if they're far away for long periods of time. All of it was so well done, and I adored every aspect of this book. This was heart-wrenchingly gorgeously written. The story itself, the adventure, the conflict, the plot, the characters, everything was amazing. I even like the romance in this, and there isn't really a ton of romance in this. This was just a 5 out of 5. I am obsessed. I have been thinking about this for so long, and I am reading the sequel later this month because I'm so curious as to where this story is going to be going, especially now that we've got the whole underworld stuff going on, and there's a lot going on, but none of it ever felt forced. It all flowed so seamlessly. The pacing was amazing, and I cannot talk up this book anymore. I'm obsessed with it. So those are the top 7 books that I read in the month of April. Let me know down below in the comments what your favorite books were, and that's going to be it for today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, with the occasional Sunday, and I'll see you guys in our next video. Bye!